Hi, everybody. My name is Owen Wiseman, medical advisor to A.Vogel, and I am pleased to be with the Healthier by Nature Expo family today at the CHFA Connect. I wish I could be with you in person, but that's for next year, and fingers crossed that we can get there as soon as possible and kind of, use that Canadian spirit of helping out one another. So if you have any questions, I will be available in person in the chat. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat and I will get to them as soon as I can. Without further ado, let's get started. Now, this is just a little bit about me. It's a long paragraph to read, so you can just check me out at my website, www.owenwiseman.com, and I will be happy to connect with you there. Now, what's the data? So the first thing we want to talk about is we're talking about the family of echinophores, which is our flagship line. So I'm sure you're quite familiar with it, especially with the community at CHFA Connect, because we're just a little more educated, right? And we're a little more kind of in the know about what products we want to use and things like that. So what does the data actually say? And right now we know vaccinations are being rolled out according to public health guidelines, whether that is West Coast, East Coast, Ontario, BC. Everyone is having their own individual rollout. So in the meantime, the big question is kind of how can we empower our immunity and how can we support our bodies? And we just continue to follow public health guidelines, which are not different from how we treat any other virus or pathogen that goes around in the body, right? We want to wash our hands during flu season. We want to maintain our distance from one another to make sure we're not coughing on each other. We want to ensure that we get our rest as well, because we know that a well-rested body, one that's had sleep, our immune system is going to be stronger. So it's easier to kind of fend off all of these infections. We want to eat a balanced diet, right? And try to meet the Canadian guidelines of our recommended dietary allowance every day as much as possible. And we each have our own kind of individual way of going about it. And that's where our health experts, our medical professionals, they can kind of help us find the most optimal way to support our diet and to support the individualized approach to eating. We want to support our immunity with clinically proven products as well, which is what we're going to talk about in this webinar. Now, what I'm very excited to kind of communicate to you is that there was an in vitro study conducted that demonstrated that echinophores has activity against SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that actually causes COVID-19. Those are kind of synonymous. Now, further evidence is needed to understand its action in humans. I really can't stress that enough, but that's the exciting part about the time that we're currently living in, is that we do see kind of this early research pointing towards potential other ways to use a lot of the products that we know and love to help further support our immunity during this time, right? Now, this is the entire kind of echinophores family line, and we're not going to be talking about each one so much individually, but really looking at them holistically and as a family and what benefits they help support. So we know we have our tincture, our tabs, whether it's the regular strength 400 milligrams or the extra strength 1200 milligrams. We also have the junior, our hot drink with elderberry, and also the sore throat spray. So we're going to go through kind of the family of products in a moment. So what are the key facts to really take away? We know that based off of the dozens of papers that have been done on echinophores, it does reinforce the immune system. And we know that because there have been human clinical trials. One of the largest echinacea trials ever conducted was done on echinophores. So that's really exciting that you have this large scale trial that had hundreds of participants that led to Health Canada licensing echinophores for both prevention and treatment of upper respiratory tract infections. We also know that it's safe for pregnant and nursing women. And that is a really, really big standout, at least for me, even working in a clinic, because when I look at that, I'm going, well, any of my friends or family members who have ever gotten pregnant, they're looking to put the best, safest stuff in their body, whether it's because the infant is about to arrive or they've already arrived and now they're breastfeeding and want to put the safest stuff inside of them. So we have that licensing as well. It can be taken up to 4 months for daily support. And that's a really neat thing. When you look at kind of echinacea products, some of them might say, well, you have to stop it after 2 weeks. But based off of that large scale clinical human trial, we know that you can take echinophores every single day for up to 4 months, right? So that's a really nice way to help support the immune system throughout cold and flu season. Really high transparency of research as well. Everything's published and you are more than welcome to kind of have a peek of that and ensure everything is good to go. Now, highest quality assurance, all of the products go through dozens of different quality assurance steps before they're released from Switzerland, where they're grown, harvested, and processed and manufactured and brought into Canada. So that's the really exciting part too. It's fresh herbs only. We never dry them. And the benefit to that is kind of when you look at some of these dried products, when you dry the product, some of the components within are sensitive to heat. So if you use the fresh product, because they are literally steps outside the manufacturing facility, then there's no need to dry them. And so that freshness has actually been shown to be 10 times more effective for Echinophorus versus a dried product. And it's all organic, non-GMO. Now, going back to kind of that research that we just mentioned about the in vitro study against Echinophorus, so these are different members of the coronavirus family. Now, what they wanted to kind of identify was the impact of Echinophorus on the viruses and basically determine what's called their IC50. So what concentration of Echinophorus does it take to completely shut down that virus? So when we look at kind of the Middle Eastern respiratory version of the coronavirus, SARS, the original one that struck years ago, and then HCoV-2 29E is just kind of the common cold strain of coronavirus. And what we saw is that at 50 nanograms per milliliter, which is equivalent to the 400 milligram preventative dose, we do see that things are completely inhibited. Now, this is just kind of our quality assurance statement, right? So it is in vitro. So the study did reveal an effectiveness against a spectrum of coronaviruses, including COVID-19, but additional human clinical studies are required to further support its broad antiviral activity against this specific virus. So we can kind of continue to empower our immunity outside of this. I cannot stress enough, this is not stating that we have this magic cure for COVID, right? So we continue to follow public health guidelines right now as we await the rollout of the vaccines and kind of the other ways that we're helping to support our immunity right now. Now, this was kind of the research summary to take away. So we already talked about those three prior viruses, members of the coronavirus family, and now we're looking at COVID-19. Now, what we do understand about the virus from a research perspective is that COVID-19 has been shown to actually suppress what's called interferon production. Now, the kind of benefit to Echinophorus is that we know from prior research conducted to understand its activities, interferon suppression causes more severe symptoms. So we know that COVID-19 potentially is causing really severe symptoms by shutting down interferon production. Now, Echinophorus has the ability to boost those interferons by 18%. So you kind of have this seesaw effect where COVID-19 is really trying to diminish them and suppress them. And then you have Echinophorus coming in and saying, no, we need to boost those in order to support the immunity of the body. Now, what we did see in this study was a repeat of the research that was done on prior members of the coronaviruses, so family. So we see that virucidal activity against SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, again at 50 nanograms. So there's something really special kind of about that concentration, that 400 milligram preventative dose. So the benefit is there. We have some early understanding about how it's possibly helping to support our immunity in the long run. So kind of the takeaway here is that Echinophorus is virucidal against the common cold coronavirus strain, and upon direct contact and in a human respiratory cell culture model, not humans. Based on the study, it does seem to show activity against the structure of the coronavirus family, much like how early research has shown that Echinophorus attacks the structure of influenza virus, which is why it's been shown to be effective against multiple strains of influenza instead of just one. So now we kind of come to this conversation around digital fatigue, right? And that's a really big one because right now we're working from home and there's dangers of what's called continuous partial attention. And that's where we're trying to basically divide our attention between 1,000 different people on the screen, let's say. So, in a normal workday, we have the opportunity to really focus on a task with the odd interruption from a coworker or the ding of a new email coming through. Now, when it comes to the digital age of working from home, we're participating in countless virtual calls, whether it's Teams or Zooms, and it places a lot of strain on our brain. So the term continuous partial attention was actually coined in the late 1990s by Linda Stone, who's a former Apple and Microsoft executive. So, in a normal day-to-day conversation, a meeting, the brain actually responds to both verbal and nonverbal cues to kind of create this holistic picture of what's happening and what's going on. The trouble now is that we've lost a lot of those nonverbal cues, and that shift is forcing our brains to intensely focus on the words that people are saying, right? And we're really trying to glean as much information as we can. So we're staring into the screens a lot more intensely than we might kind of have used to in an in-person setting. And we've also kind of lost the ability to have parallel conversations because of that digital crosstalk. And we can play devil's advocate and talk about breakout rooms, but these lack kind of that organic flow of switching or engaging different individuals in the room. So it really damages kind of that innovation that's born from collaboration. And we know that people are more collaborative when they can see one another and receive feedback. So all of this to say is that we're really prone to what's called computer vision syndrome. And it in a study in 2016, the researchers actually thought that it affected 50 to 90% of those working on digital devices. But again, now because we're dividing our attention on a screen, I'm sure if they repeated the study in 2020, that number might be, closer to 80 to 100% of us are experiencing that really powerful digital fatigue. And you leave kind of the computer at the end of the day feeling completely exhausted and wiped. And what are the symptoms of computer vision syndrome? Because we're staring at that screen, you get these symptoms of blurred vision, double vision, headaches, and dry eyes as well. So it's kind of at that point, what are we to do really? And you look at kind of the anatomy of the eye even, and it's placing strain on what's called the lens of the eye. Now, typically our normal blinking pattern is about 15 times per minute, but the new normal, when you actually look at it for digital work, is only about 5 to 7 times per minute. And that's coming from the American Academy of Ophthalmology. So that's a third of the blinking that we're doing. So you can really see how that might contribute to symptoms of computer vision syndrome, just like we highlighted. And also risks of less blinking include a swollen cornea, dry and itchy eyes, infection, damage due to debris. So there's a lot of different kind of factors that get introduced. Now, one thing I've kind of highlighted on here is what's known the vitreous humor. Now, one of the compounds that's quite concentrated in the vitreous humor is what's known as hyaluronic acid. Now, you might hear the word acid and kind of get your back against the wall, but this is fine. It's a natural compound that we want in the body. And the reason is hyaluronic acid actually can hold on to thousands of times its own molecular weight in water. That's why hyaluronic acid is often seen in skincare products as well, or cosmetics, because at the end of the day, it's very moisturizing, it's very hydrating, it's very lubricating as well. So you can already kind of see how the wheels might be turning, thinking, ooh, this would be a good option to consider if I have really, really dry eyes. And that's exactly where we're going with eye drops. So the eye drops were a really nice introduction to the A.Vogel family because they contain hyaluronic acid, and it is one of the compounds of the vitreous humor, like we just highlighted. It also has some natural antibacterial properties, so it can help reduce the risk of infection when it is applied to the eyes, right? We can consider things like conjunctivitis as well, and it could help fend that off. Now, when we look at kind of the other ingredients, we have eyebright in here. So the beautiful thing about whoever named eyebright is that it really states what it does. So eyebright is used to kind of help reduce inflammation in the eye. And there was a human clinical trial conducted in 2000, and it demonstrated complete recovery from conjunctivitis in 81.5% of the 65 participants in the trial using the euphrasia drop. So that's a really nice, just kind of added benefit to adding euphrasia into the product. The other one is boric acid, and we've been asked about this in the past in terms of, well, why is that added? Now, boric acid is actually a buffer. If you introduce eye drops that are a very different pH from the actual kind of fluid of the eye, you can really irritate the eye. So you need to kind of buffer the pH to make sure that it matches that of the eye to reduce irritation or inflammation. Now you can kind of see this weird bottle design going on here, and you're probably wondering, what the heck is that about? Now, the nice thing about the bottle design is that it actually is kind of a vacuum chamber. So there's not any air that gets introduced back into the bottle. You think of any regular eyedropper, as soon as you squeeze that rubber bulb and you drop it into the eye, and you release it, you've pulled air back into the chamber. You've contaminated the chamber with just the air around the room. With an eye drop like this, you're not worrying about that. So that's why from the time of opening, it lasts 6 months and it's completely preservative and phosphate free because it doesn't need them, because no air is entering the chamber. So there's no contamination to worry about. It's also compatible with contact lenses. And the nice thing is it releases a single drop at a time. So even in terms of a cost effectiveness consideration, it's really cost effective because you're not getting 10, 20 drops at a time where your mascara is smearing and you're all concerned about that. So a single drop at a time, it's more makeup friendly. So we already kind of talked about the delivery system, fast acting relief, yeah, contact lens friendly and all that fun stuff. Now, these are kind of just our 5 other tips to avoid digital fatigue. So we want to sit arm's length at least from the computer. So that's a really good distance for the eyes to kind of get a break and not feel so strained, right? That's about 25 inches for the average individual. And then we also want to position our screen so that our eyes actually gaze slightly downwards instead of upwards. And then we also want to take regular breaks using the 20-20-20 rule. So every 20 minutes, shift your eyes to look at an object at least 20 feet away for 20 seconds and just look at it, and it'll help relax the muscles of the eyes so they're not used to staring at one distance for 8 hours during the day, for instance. And then blink, right? Think to blink. Blinking is the eye's way of getting moisture to reach its surface, right? Make a conscious effort to blink as often as possible, and it keeps the surface of your eyes from drying out. And you might even want to put a sticky note on your computer, hey, don't forget to blink. So every time you look at it, you take a couple blinks. You can even use kind of artificial tears like we talked about, the eye drops, to keep the eye lubricated when you're feeling dry, especially if you're in a really dry, warm room. Consider even using a humidifier to add moisture to the air. And then the other thing is adjust the contrast on your screen, because if the screen glows brighter than your surroundings, your eyes actually have to work a lot harder to see. Right? So adjust your screen brightness to match the level of the light around you, and also try increasing the contrast to reduce eye strain. When the contrast is greater, it makes it easier for the brain to kind of pick out, whereas these soft blurred edges, when the contrast is really low, make it tiresome on the eyes to kind of pick out the differences. And this is our reminder to think to blink. So what I want you to do right now, while you're listening, release your tongue from the roof of your mouth because you're probably holding it there. After that, relax the jaw. We often hold tension in the jaw, and that can lead to headaches as well. So now relax your jaw and blink. And now we're moving on to our deep sleep. Maybe when you blinked, you saw this sheep. So, counting sheep at night, it's very fitting now that we're on this slide. So the big thing about digital fatigue as well is that now we're finding our sleep patterns have shifted because our pets are on a different schedule, our children are on a different schedule. So we really want to look at ensuring that we're getting an appropriate amount of sleep. And if you'll recall, when we were talking about supporting our immunity, getting a deep sleep is one of the foundations of health to help support our immune function, and just that we're able to be present mentally and physically during the day and not dozing off at 2-3 p.m. or missing 5 cups of coffee. So deep sleep is really nice because it's a combination of valerian and hops, and all those extracts are fresh and organic. And so when you kind of look at fresh harvested herbs, again, we have kind of that more complete spectrum of active ingredients. So this higher therapeutic value before drying occurs. And what we've seen is that there was a clinical trial and it improved deep sleep up to 25% after just one dose. Who wouldn't want to have a 25% deeper or longer sleep? So this is just another kind of slide to help support that, right? So we know that there's sedative herbs that help promote sleep and relaxation, and we can use them when stress levels are high and we're having a lot of trouble, like insomnia. It also helps to promote mental calmness and really does help kind of get us into a deeper state a little quicker. Now, the one thing we kind of want to be conscious of is this is called deep sleep. So we want to use it before we're going to bed, because if we're using it during the daytime, we might have that daytime sleepiness, which, obviously if you're too sedated, you don't want to be stepping into a vehicle and putting other people at danger. So this is kind of the clinical trial that we talked about. So we wanted to really evaluate the time and depth of sleep with one dose of deep sleep. And this was done by the head of a laboratory that was specializing in brain research in Switzerland. And you can just see, I always laugh when I see these pictures of sleep studies because I just wonder how in God's name could anybody actually have a decent sleep when you're wrapped in wires? But I mean, the research is there, so we don't question it at that point. It's been proven time and time again. And this is what happened. So these are actually the different sleep rhythms that people went through. So blue is really good sleeper. So if you're someone who can just shut their eyes, you fall asleep within the average time of 7 minutes, and you wake up feeling refreshed, good for you. So you're kind of the blue data points right now. And we're going to use you to compare to other people. And you can see they kind of get down really deep into sleep quite quickly, right? And then when we actually look at the waves that they're going through, on average, you cycle through these 90-minute cycles during sleep. And you can see that these people really follow that along. And so don't worry about this number so much. That just represents the depth of sleep in kind of a percentage of normal wakefulness. You can see that the red are the group that got a placebo and they had a really bad sleep. There's a lot of red data points that are above the line. So they're in a deeper state here relative to what they're in the rest of the chart, but you can see they're waking a little bit earlier because there's a lot of red data points above the line. And then you look at the group taking the deep sleep product, and they're a little more in line with down here at the blue, kind of this happy median between the blue and the red. So you can really see how it's helping to improve that onset of sleep and how deep you're going actually. Now again, this is just a different way to kind of visualize that study. So this is in the first night. And remember, these dark shaded areas are actually when you're in a very deep sleep. There's not a lot of area under the line, right? But then after deep sleep was administered, and now it doesn't want to work, which is totally okay. Actually, you can see that now. So you can really see how the gray area under the line is far more significant, right? There's a lot more gray area, which tells us that the individual is getting a much deeper sleep. So if you're below 80%, just to give you kind of context, you were sleeping. But if you were below 68%, you were in that very deep state of sleep. So again, just to show you here, I don't know why I bounced forward, but look at the difference. Now we get to kind of passion flower. So this is just a little extra bonus that you can add on in terms of finding your balance. So passion flower helps to relieve physical agitation, restlessness, nervousness, anxiety, panic attacks. So passion flower is just a really nice kind of daytime stress and fatigue addition when you're feeling overwhelmed. Now we talk about igniting your health. And this is going to be a family member known as BioStrath. So BioStrath has been around for 60 plus years. It's the 60-year anniversary actually this year, and it has a lot of data on it. So again, this is another product that's made, produced, and exported from Switzerland that we have here in Canada. Now, there's studies on individuals with ADD and ADHD, and it helps support them. It helps in pre-geriatric or pre-Alzheimer's populations to support memory and concentration. There's been studies done on immunity that it helps again strengthen and support the immunity, supports recovery from illness and exercise. And a big standout one is assisting with the absorption of nutrients, which we'll talk about shortly. In terms of energy as well, it helps to reduce fatigue and stress, increase vitality, help to restore and maintain natural energy. And the reason it does this is because it's a plasmalized herbal yeast product. So basically we have these yeast cells working for us, and this is not candida. It's actually protective against candida. But you have these yeast products that are breaking down a blend of herbs and plants and turning them into the most basic building blocks that we need in the body. So 11 different vitamins, the whole spectrum, full spectrum of amino acids, the full spectrum of B vitamins as well, 19 minerals and trace elements, and 11 building substances such as lecithin, which is a phosphatidylcholine synonymous with that, or glutathione even. So you have all these other kind of really cool building blocks. L-carnitine, ATP production, helping out with kind of fatty acid oxidation as well. So really, really beneficial aspects. So in terms of kind of the Health Canada claim, it helps to promote well-being by decreasing fatigue and supporting the body during periods of physical and mental stress, and it's a source of antioxidants. So the nice thing is it comes in an elixir form, in a tab form, in a drop form, and this is kind of what we want to pay attention to. So in terms of gluten intolerant, tablets and tincture are good for gluten intolerant. The only reason the elixir isn't is it does have honey in it, so, and malt as well. So the honey and the malt won't obviously be friendly to those who are gluten intolerant. Now, sugar-free, again, it has honey in it. So the tablets and the tincture are sugar-free. All of them are lactose free, so very lactose friendly. For vegetarians, they're all friendly for vegetarians. Now for vegans, because of the honey, the elixir is not an option, but that's fine because you go with the tablets or the tincture as well. Now this is the absorption study. So basically they exposed human intestinal cells, half of them to BioStrath, and half the group didn't get the exposure to BioStrath, the cell culture. Now, at the end of the study, what we saw is that when you exposed both of these groups of human gastrointestinal cells, the group that was exposed to BioStrath actually had increased uptake of different minerals and nutrients, including iron, magnesium, zinc, and B1, right? We know zinc is a huge one that kind of the community and the population is seeing right now in terms of protecting and supporting our immunity. Iron, you're bringing more iron into the body, and magnesium. So I really like BioStrath in my own life as kind of this complementary product. So if I have a magnesium or an iron from anywhere else, any other health food store, it doesn't matter which, by combining my intake of, say, magnesium with a dose of BioStrath, I'm actually improving the absorption. So instead of, say, absorbing off the top of my head 60% of the magnesium pill that I just swallowed, maybe I'm going to absorb 70% or 80%. And so that magnesium is a little more efficient at getting into my system and actually having the beneficial impacts that we want to see. So in summary, in terms of this presentation, we've talked about supporting your immunity with Echinoforce, safe for pregnant and breastfeeding, all of them except for the sore throat spray. We've talked about eye drops to help avoid that digital fatigue and that strain that we're putting on our eyes. We've talked about deep sleep and how the change in routine has led to higher rates of insomnia for individuals. So deep sleep to help us actually get rested and feel rested. Passion flower to help with kind of that daytime anxiety and stress that we're really experiencing to help kind of reduce it and allow us to function better. And then finally, BioStrath, which can ignite your health and really helping us ensure that we get our full spectrum of nutrients that we need in order to help the body function at its peak. Now, if you do have any questions, please head to avogel.ca to learn more, whether it's about the individual products, whether it's about the research studies. Please head to A.Vogel. We have kind of a retailer zone which has all the clinical studies available. And by all means, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to any member of our team. In terms of a CHFA special, what's really, really neat is that you can actually join us at 4 p.m. to see how our bartender gets creative with Echinoforce. So you can even learn how to mix your own tasty drinks with therapeutic benefits. The other thing we kind of wanted to bring up is that in terms of a promo code that'll run from March 20th today to March 26th, there's 25% off at A.Vogel, and the code there is HBN25, right? Healthier by Nature 25. Plus, with every order of 25% off, you also get 2 free 10 milligram or 10 gram mini Herbamare products per order. So Herbamare, it's 100% natural fine sea salt infused with 12 organically grown, freshly harvested herbs and veggies. It's a great alternative to trim your salt intake and also turn up the flavor in all of your dishes. So definitely consider using that before it runs away, because 25% is nothing to kind of turn our heads at. Thank you so much for your time and for attending this webinar. Like I said, I'm in the comments answering questions, and if I can't get to your question in time, by all means, please reach out. My personal my company email is owiseman@bioforce.ca, and I am more than happy to take the time to have a conversation with you about what the A.Vogel family products can do for you. Otherwise, enjoy the expo, and we'll see you around.